Hey, what's up, Internet? It's that time again. We've got Ultimatum League just around the corner, and I wanted to get a video out to update everybody on the Freezing Pulse Totem build for 3.14. To just go over the changes in the patch really quick, there isn't much to talk about, actually. There's a minor nerf to Frost Bomb. Well, I don't know about minor, but the cold exposure is going from 25 to 15% cold pen. So we're going to lose 10% cold damage penetration here. There's no real escaping this nerf because they also hit Wave of Convictions exposure. So there's just no longer going to be any 25% exposure in the game. It's just getting reduced to a 15% maximum. It's not significant enough that I'm going to take Frostbomb out of the build, like in favor of one of the other exposure elements. Like you can get exposure on a Redeemer Wand or, in Cluster Jewels or something. But the opportunity cost doesn't make sense to me still. And they're still weaker, right? Those versions of exposure are still going to be 10%. So getting it from the base skill, I think, is going to be the best way to go. There was also a nerf to Vengeful Commander, which is a node that I'd often run in my large cluster when I got to a 3-node large. The nerf to Vengeful Commander is small. It's going from 20 to 15% increased aura effect on Hatred. But it is enough that, like, this was already close. It's definitely not going to be worth the trouble to try and get Vengeful Commander alongside Blanketed Snow anymore. Blanketed Snow is now going to be the actual important bit, and you can just kind of do almost whatever you want here. I'm probably going to target Prismatic Heart if I can, but I'll probably just take whatever 3 notable I can get that has Blanketed Snow and 8 passive points, because almost all of the decent damage options here are going to wind up looking pretty similar now that Vengeful Commander is no longer the lead. So actually, I think Prismatic Heart is slightly more damage than this because we're not scaling our aura effect at all. There was also a bug fix that I'm a little bit concerned about, and I think we'll probably feel even more than the Frostbomb nerf, which is that it said that the increased effect of non-damaging ailments stat was being applied twice, which is pretty relevant to us, even from a damage perspective, because we were running Cold Conduction, and we'll still be running Cold Conduction, which gives us a 15% shock when our hits chill enemies. And the increased effect of non-damaging ailment stat does scale that shock. So if we were getting twice as much effect out of this stat as we were meant to, our shock was probably a lot stronger than it was meant to be. Now, I don't know for certain if that bug fix is as global as it sounds, like this stat was just twice as effective for everything as it really was supposed to be. That's how it's written, though. And so I think we might feel that a little bit more than the Frostbomb nerf. It remains to be seen, and it's something I'm going to have to feel out once the league starts. But if anything, that'll be the most significant change to us that we didn't know we were benefiting from. The path of building numbers will still be right, but the path of building probably didn't, ever know that this bug existed, right? Now, oftentimes in the past, when I make these update videos, I just talk about the changes, but since there's so few, I figure we'll run a map. A lot of people like to see some content. This is a high-end version of the build. This was my ritual character. He was level 100, and he has some very good gear. But I do want to just show you an example of a map. This is an Awakener 9. It's a pretty simple rare map, but it'll give you an idea of the basic clear and boss experience for this build. One of the reasons I like this build so much is that it's very smooth. It's not the fastest map by any means, but it has a slight clear tilt to it instead of single target, and I think that is sort of the way to play Path of Exile at the moment, frankly. As long as you can get your single target to where your bossing is, at least a little bit better than average with investment, I feel like that tends to work out a little bit better in terms of overall progress, especially a league start. And, after the changes to Hierophant in 3.13, where we have even more totem placement speed now, it really does feel just like a super smooth build to run. And he just died. That was an Awakener 9 Phoenix, by the way. Although I don't have a portal scroll, I just realized. So I guess we will walk back and look for one of those really quick. professional YouTuber here. Not really. But yeah, so that was just sort of a general mapping experience. Is there really no portals? Am I going to have to log out? Oh boy. Now, I'll go over the basics for this build. I haven't done sort of a general guide update for Freezing Pulse Totems. Okay, D&D's still on. I haven't done that in a while. And this seems like a pretty good time to do it just because nothing's changing for this build, and it's in sort of the most stable position it's been for a while. And so there's sort of two phases to this build. There's your league start phase, and then there's your end game phase. And I'll typically define that by your gear setup. So when you first start this build, you're going to be in a setup. You might not have a Pandemonious, right? Although I think at this point we can leave it. The Pandemonious has dropped in price a lot. Anyway, the basic setup involves a Soul Mantle, which is this chest piece that has Spell Totem built into it. It has +1 to maximum number of totems, and it has this affix, inflicts a random level 20 curse on you when your totems die. I think nowadays the modern version of this affix inflicts a random hex on you when your totems die with 80% more effect. But the point is, when your totems die, and your totems die when you resummon them, and they have to, like some of them have to despawn to make room for the new ones, that still counts as them dying. So you can see we stack curses on ourselves very, very quickly. So we have to have some protection against this concept. And that for us, that's going to be, at the start, is going to be Kikazara rings that have this 40% reduced effect of curses on you. We'll wear 2 of those to get 80% reduced effect. And then we'll come down here, if we switch to the actual Kikazara tree, and we'll get Sanctum of Thought for another 20% reduced effect of curses. And that puts you at 100% reduced effect of curses, completely nullifying the effect of curses from Soul Mantle. And this gives you sort of a base to work from, right? We can add Self-Flagellation to this to get 20% increased damage per curse on you. So we'll easily, be over 100% increased damage on average from this jewel, making it sort of an end. This jewel will stay in your build for the rest of the game. And then we have some other really basic uniques, right? Like I said, Pandemonious you probably won't have at league start. We'll get like a decent, well, that's a pretty good rare actually. But Pandemonious has gotten cheaper, I would say, since 3.13 because of how much more accessible the Breach Lords are. And they're only getting more accessible in 3.14, so this is not like the biggest reach anymore. But we have like a Wise Oak. We have a couple of First Snow Jewels. These allow us to get 2 extra projectiles on our Freezing Pulse per jewel. This is a big clear speed increase. And then like a Clear Mind, just for some mana regen and then spell damage while we have no mana reserved. And we don't want to have mana reserve because this is a Mind Over Matter build. So we are using our mana as a partial life pool. Now when you start this build, at the very start, I recommend leveling it with Holy Flame Totem. And that's how my path of building is set up. Act by act. This is a Holy Flame Totem leveling tree. And this is all covered in the written version of the guide if you want the full leveling tips and stuff. But at some point, you'll get the Soul Mantle and the 2 Kikazaras together. And you check a few other things off that I mentioned in the forum guide. Making sure you can balance your resists and things like that. And at some point, you'll just swap to Freezing Pulse Totems. You'll take out Avatar of Fire and a few other nodes. The trees are very, very similar, though, which is why I don't mind leveling with Holy Flame Totem. Like, if you look at the Holy Flame Totem tree, and then you look at what the tree looks like after you swap, it's not terribly different, right? And so, it's best to just level with whatever totem makes your life easier. And now, like I said, this is sort of the first half. This is your league start experience. And this, even a Kikazara setup, is plenty to get you to red maps. It's really not a problem. Once you're into red maps, though, you're going to start wanting to look for ways to scale your damage, right? Because you're going to be getting to the hardest version of the Conquerors. You're going to have Cirrus coming up. And before, it took a little bit of currency farming because the best way to scale our damage from this point was to get something called Aziri's Reflection. And I'm sure I've got one of these in my stash here. And so this at Zeri's Reflection has this unaffected by curses line. So instead of using our ring slots to do this, we could use a weapon slot. But it also had unaffected by curses, which is important because it's not reduced or, you know, a scaling effect. It's just unaffected no matter how strong the curse is. And so it didn't just open up our ring slot to get back, right? It opened up something like Coward's Legacy, which curses us with a stronger vulnerability and has 50% increased effective curses. So you can't run this belt where you have Kikazarals. You just still get mauled by the curses. But with Atziri's, it doesn't matter how strong the curse is. You're just always unaffected by them. And this allowed us to count as low life whenever we're cursed with vulnerability. And this belt, as you can see, puts a permanent vulnerability on you. So you're just always at low life. So that opened up Pain Attunement for another 30% more spell damage. Basically, the scaling options, you know, to us were gated behind this Atziri's Reflection Shield. The problem being, this is an extremely rare item. This at League Start typically costs you no less than like 15 exalts, right? And so it's a little bit painful to sit there and farm until you can figure out how to get into this shield. But with 3.13 and Echoes of the Atlas, we were gifted a new item called Viridi's Veil. And if you look up here in the Path of Building, which you can find in the description, I have this second gear set called Viridi's Setup. Now this Viridi's Veil helm was introduced last patch, and it drops from the Maven encounter, like the final boss of the Echoes of the Atlas expansion. And it's one of her more common drops. It's not her most common. The boots and the belt are more common, but this drops pretty regularly. It's not anywhere near as rare as, say, the body armor. And it has +2 to level of socketed gems, which actually is not super relevant to this build. It does have 25% all res. But the relevant, like the reason we want this helm is this: you are hexproof if you have a magic ring in your right slot. And at first glance, some people read that and they think, well, I don't want to be hexproof because I want curses to apply to me. But hexproof was changed in Heist League to where the hexes still apply, but they have no effect, which is essentially the same thing as unaffected by curses. It's just specific to hexes. The nice thing is that that's what we care about. We care about being hexproof because A, Soul Mantle doesn't apply marks to us, and B, enemies don't apply marks either, right? So the big thing here is that we have access to something like unaffected by curses, except this item is like 5 chaos, or it was towards the end of Ritual League, because nobody's using this helmet, right? This is not some super rare helmet that everybody wants. This is more like the helmet that drops from Cirrus, right? I can never remember the name of that thing off of the top of my head, but a pretty decent helmet actually, but people just don't use it a lot. So with this, we can use the same scaling power, right? Coward's Legacy to open up Pain Attunement. We get our other ring slot back, so we can still run Hatred, right? And you know, Hatred opens up things like Watcher's Eye for even more damage scaling. And so it's pretty easy to, if we look at, so here's the Kikazara setup. We're doing about 518,000 per totem in this setup across 6 totems. But if we switch to Viridi's and we add Hatred, something else I'm missing here. Oh, we're going to the wrong tree. So 833,000 just for making the swap. And this is no longer such an expensive change, right? We're not saving up 12 to 15 exalts to buy an Atziri's before we can even consider this. You know, we've got like a couple exalt belt and Viridi's Veil, which was super cheap. Basically, as soon as people hit Maven in the end game and start farming her, which the earliest people are going to do very quickly, right? That's an extremely important boss to hit because of the Maven's orbs. And so people are going to be going after her pretty early. And as soon as they do, you're going to start seeing Viridi's Veils hit the trade market. You're unlikely to see one that has a Freezing Pulse enchant for a while, but the amount of damage we can start scaling once we have access to this item And we do get our other weapon slot back, right? Which is a really powerful damage slot too. It's definitely worth doing. The helmet enchant is nowhere near important enough to give up this kind of power. And once you're here, you can really start scaling your damage much more effectively. And so if we go back to our higher end example, this is the character you're seeing right here. This gear setup, which is the end of Ritual League. To be fair, this is really good. This was the last time we were ever going to see Harvest as strong as it was, and I had a fair bit of currency in that league. All of those exalts are from that league. But you know, we were doing over 4 million per totem here, and this is serious DPS. There's no funny business in this. I assume 5 curses. Enemies are chilled by my hits, and consecrated ground, assuming that my bottle of faith is under them. That's it. And so we have 6 totems, right? So this is over 25 million shaper DPS. So there's a lot of room to scale your damage, and you can scale it even further in a Viridi's Veil setup. So we just no longer need that Aziri's Reflection to really make the build start to pop off. And it just sort of fixes that bump in the progression, which I think makes this one of the most fun League Start builds for me. I really value how smooth the build is from day one with Holy Flame Totem, which just crushes the story. I just did a leveling series with Holy Flame Totem, and it's not the fastest thing you'll ever see because it's me talking a lot and doing every single side quest. But I just wanted to show how easy it is, I think, to level with Holy Flame Totem. One of my favorite ways to level. And then that gracefully transitions to an early Freezing Pulse setup with Kizaru's, and that pretty quickly translates into a Viridi's Veil setup as soon as people start killing Maven. And from there, it's just going to be what you want to do, right? We took this character to level 100. I don't remember how many deaths we had in the end. We had 48 deaths across the entire league, which is a lot for me. Anybody who has watched my channel for a while knows that. But this is also partly because, like I said, I killed Maven literally over 700 times in Ritual. I was trying to get some drop data information from her and found it kind of inconclusive, unfortunately. But yeah, the build will do whatever you want it to, pretty much. I would say the only thing that this build is not terribly suited for is Delve. And I think that's a little bit true of most totems, although you can do it, right? It's not hard to get reasonably deep with this build, especially if you invest, but it's just not where it shines, I would say. The sort of claustrophobic environments, and I think totems are particularly ill-suited to dealing with darkness, right? But it's certainly not terrible. I have no problem going into Delve, at least to like 400. I just don't like Delve anyway. So I'm never eager to stick around. So if you're a Delver, well, first off, F for the patch notes, but this is probably not the build for you if you're a really hardcore Delver. But otherwise, I've never seen a piece of content that I have not been able to take on very early on in a league with this build. It does require some dodging. This is not the tankiest build in the world, but between Mind Over Matter, a decent amount of regen, we have Steel Skin on a cast when damage taken. Most importantly, we have Freeze, and just the innate ability to lock things down from Freezing Pulse and high levels of cold damage. It's invaluable. It's worth so much more than a build that can't freeze but has more defenses, in my opinion. I tend to die far less on this build than I do even Holy Flame Totem if I'm trying to play that. The last time I tried to play that beyond, you know, into endgame and stuff. It's just super valuable to be able to lock things down. Almost all bosses can be frozen anymore, and even against higher end targets like the Guardian tier enemies and up that can't be frozen, they get chilled pretty hard by this build, and so they're much slower and easier to dodge and deal with. Plus, you just have the fact that you're playing totems. So not only are totems chilling and freezing things, you're over here, right? You're running around like one of the Three Stooges. Your totems are the ones doing all the work. So you have a lot of extra, like, you know, brain cycles. There's a lot of attention that you don't have to give the act of attacking, and you can spend most of that time focusing on not running face first into a shaper ball or something. So it just tends to be a more survivable build than you might think looking at it in Path of Building. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this video up here. I just wanted to get another video out for 3.14 because I know people are always curious about what the updates are for this build. I think the build is in great shape. I think the nerfs are pretty minor. I'm a little bit concerned about the increased effect of non-damaging ailments note, but it's ultimately going to be something that starts shaving off damage at the higher end. You know, after you have cold conduction, you're starting to stack more and more damage. You might feel that a little bit more, but I honestly don't know. I don't know if that bug fix note is really even as global as it sounds. And other than that, you know, there are a lot of builds caught it a heck of a lot worse than we did, right? For the most part, it's just Frostbomb that got clipped. Maybe Trigger Wand, I guess. But none of those things are going to remotely stop it from being an excellent League Start build that will stick around and pay dividends if you continue to invest into it. So if you have any questions about this build, something you think I didn't cover sufficiently, feel free to leave a question in the comments, or you can come find me at League Start at twitch.tv/WallachTV. And if you found this video helpful, make sure to hit the thumbs up and all the YouTube buttons because YouTube loves that stuff. As for me, I'll catch you guys tomorrow for League Start and Ultimatum. Peace.